welcome to Duncan Toplis On Air. I'm Caroline Cleary. I'm the Marketing Director at Duncan Toplis, and I'm really pleased to be joined today by Stuart Brown, who's our Head of Technical and Compliance. And today we're going to talk about all things compliance, including Stuart's recent appointment to the ICAEW board and his membership of the Creston Global ESG Advisory Committee, which I'm sure keeping you busy.
Very much so.
Welcome, Stuart.
Thanks, Caroline. So looking forward to this opportunity to discuss various elements of my role, compliance, regulation, and as you mentioned there, leaning into the ESG side of things.
Yeah. Maybe start with compliance. So, what do you see as the significance of compliance in the field of accountancy, and why is it so crucial?
Such a big question. It is fundamental to everything we do. So tax compliance, audit compliance, ethical standards compliance. We must be compliant. So we're not compliant and we don't assist our clients in being compliant, then we failed at what we do.
And how does that work in accountancy? So I'm aware of the ICAEW. Could you explain the key regulatory bodies and standards that kind of govern what we do as an accountancy practice?
Okay, so we are certainly governed as a firm by the ICAEW. In turn, they are governed by the Financial Reporting Council, HM Treasury in terms of anti-money laundering legislation, various government bodies, taxation, HMRC. There's a whole host of different regulatory elements there.
And how does that impact clients individually? So what sort of issues might businesses face if they're not compliant, if they're not using the skill sets and tools of a team like ours?
Yeah, I mean, well, the worst case scenario, they could open themselves up to legal action if they're not paying fraud, or they think they can not treat expenses in the correct way, for example, and they're intentionally doing so. Well, it's fraud. So we can help them stay on track. We can help them do the right thing. I think that's the case for any size of business.
So there's been some really big cases recently, particularly around the Big Four and failures of compliance that have led to quite significant issues. What were your key takeouts from that?
Yeah. So the FRC, there's been a review of the FRC, there's been a review of the audit market. They were seen, I think there's some quite aggressive quotes against them. Toothless, I think, was one of them. Right. Since then, I think we have seen them jump into action and really look at enforcing audit regulations, ethical standards. A lot of the things I read about, I think, as you refer to there, do relate to audits. There's a very big one that didn't. But for myself, a lot of things do come back to ethics. Conflicts of interest, not doing what you're meant to do, ultimately not preparing an audit file in line with the auditing standards, and then saying you have done and making things up are ethical matters. So it's keeping ethics front and central in everything we do. I think that's the core takeaway.
Well, and that's another important connection that you have. So 2021 you were appointed to the Ethics Advisory Committee at the ICAEW. Well, I guess again it's a big question, but what's that role of ethics in accountancy?
Well, again, I think it's absolutely it's fundamental. Anyone can call themselves an accountant. Now, regulated accountants such as ourselves, i.e. our investment advice, we can give some limited investment services through a designated professional body scheme, is regulated by the ICAEW. Our audits are regulated by the ICAEW. Our anti-money laundering supervision is through the ICAEW. And through those different licenses, we must adhere to the ethical standards. So people out there, the general public, if they see that we are authorised by the ICAEW for these activities, they should have that confidence that we are doing things right, ethically right. So.
And then an interesting growth area around tools used and possibly ethical implementations as well. And I would encourage anyone listening to check out your back catalogue. But recently you've written extensively on the subject of AI and technology. And they will be influencing the compliance process. What do you see are the potential benefits and risks associated?
I think AI in particular will take away human error. So things can happen accidentally. A number may be entered in one box incorrectly by a human. AI will take that away. It will automate processes. And it moving down the line, it could alert us to trends. It could look at like what large sets of data and indicate, there might be an issue here. It'll alert the human to then go away and use that human judgment. It'll help. It'll help, in my belief. There's a lot of doomsaying about it, but I think it'll help.
So, and it's a new world and ever changing. And you touched then about kind of the remote opportunities where technology can help. And
yes.
We spoke to Heidi Thompson on a previous Duncan Toplis On Air about human interaction and how remote working has impacted from a well-being point of view, from a productivity point of view. But it perhaps has had an interaction with compliance and auditing and monitoring. And do you see any change in the industry with that remote work?
I mean, I think there has been a permanent move now for working from home more often, working remotely on audit clients more frequently. So one of the key elements has been data transfer. So where you used to go on site, you would be handed a paper file of invoices. You now need to be ensuring that data is transferred remotely, but in a safe, a GDPR compliant way. In terms of the team, keeping everyone on track, managing the audit process or whatever process you might be looking at. So it's just, again, thinking about what the issues are for the individual teams, making sure things are done properly and in a compliant manner.
So I suppose that can be challenging depending on what kind of business you work for, whether you work on your own. So for smaller businesses, for startups maybe as well, what are the key compliance considerations for them? And how can they best make sure they're meeting those in a really changing world?
Yeah. I would say for a startup business, they would be looking at it likely to be taxation matters. So making sure they're paying tax as they should be on time. Also, if they have it depends on what they do. They may have regulations that are specific to their own business, like so health and safety regulations, for example. Again, data transfer. The piece in the UK relating to data, especially online, I don't know a huge amount of detail about this, but certainly the requirements over online data are going to significantly increase. So it's about being aware of that. A big time to be alert to compliance challenges and managing that. That's right.
And I suppose another element of congratulations to you on your recent appointment to the ICAEW members and commercial board. Tell me a little bit about what does that entail? What does that work mean?
It's a board. We get together, I think it's 6 times a year, but we get to review and discuss, justify, or agree on different aspects of members. The provision of member services to the ICAEW is one of the key elements, and on commercial activities. I think one of the key areas they have looked at in recent times are the ICAEW is made up of a number of faculties. Previously, you paid your membership fee, but then you had to pay separate fees for all the different faculties, which was quite prohibitive. They weren't cheap. So they've instigated a move towards a system where you pay your membership and you do have access to all of these faculties as long as you register with them, which adds a great deal more for an ICAEW member, a huge amount of additional resource. So yeah, it covers a real wide range of aspects. I've noticed recently, for example, their website seems really slow. So I don't know if that's a basic matter. I'm not sure how to use it to complain, but I'll certainly it gives us a voice. It gives me a voice, and it gives Duncan Toplis a voice directly with a major board of the ICAEW.
Well, and helps aid their performance through that feedback as well in such a crucial area.
Yeah.
And of course, that isn't even your only appointment this year, because in January you also joined the Creston Global ESG Advisory Committee,
Yes,
which is related to your role, but also I would imagine touches on much more in that ESG environment. What does that? What are you looking to achieve in that group?
So the overall aims are to make sure within the Creston community, firms are aware. I mean, it's a global group as well, which I found really interesting. So speaking to people as members in Mexico, India, Cyprus, all across the globe. And ESG is very fragmented, reporting or assurance, and it's getting better. So it's about communicating, first of all, to firms, and then to our clients. And just trying to, specifically, I'm a member of the regulatory subcommittee, shockingly, surprisingly. And it's about keeping on top as much as possible, getting contacts from all around the world and trying to share that knowledge to member firms across the globe.
In the age of globalization, and where we talk about the world being much smaller, certainly in terms of how we do business, how do those international compliance standards impact accountancy? And specifically, I suppose, what challenges can that bring to professionals?
There's a few interesting aspects. So looking specifically at audit and the related ethical standards, there are international standards such as standard setters, such as ICAEW from an ethical point of view. And what we then see is the local interpretation. So in the UK, the FRC's interpretation of that standard and the production of our standard, which is very similar to the ICAEW standard, but there are differences. And from an international perspective, is trying to get that global consistency whilst allowing local input. So it's about allowing the local jurisdictions flexibility, but if they go too far away from the original standard, what was the point of the original standard? And we are starting to see this come into the ESG area as well. So the ICAEW have just released their first international sustainability standards, S1 and S2, whilst at the same time the EU has come up with their 12 standards of their own, so they've gone much further already. And it's about trying to align. It's a difficult game, but it's there's an alignment matter, and then trying to encourage some jurisdictions that just haven't adopted anything to try and adopt something in each area.
And I suppose we're quite fortunate here at Duncan Toplis because we have you and your team who can help us to keep up to date with these changes and these compliance requirements. Yeah. Do you have any sort of top tips, both for professionals but also for independent businesses, of where they can go? How do they find out this information of the regulations they need to be aware of?
I think the key one for a business is to employ the services of someone like ourselves, so we can help them. Obvious one, yeah. From my own perspective, it's knowing where the standards are going to come from. So sign up to newsletters, sign up to news alerts, the FRC's news alert, the international standard setters news alerts. For smaller businesses, it's about keeping in touch with reading the news, understanding, looking at the budget. Will that affect me? Speaking to your advisor about how things will affect you as a small business. There's many different sources. I personally sign up to a huge number of news alerts, but also that might be overwhelming. So it's about being able to interpret that information as well and understanding. And for example, there's a large restructuring or reforming is the word I'm looking for of Companies House. There's this has been discussed for well over a year now, but nothing has been put formally in place. So we can hear reports of every size of company will have to submit their profit and loss account to Companies House. That can be quite a scary, daunting prospect, but nothing has actually been said of when this is going to happen and exactly how it's going to happen. So
keep knowing what's on the cards, and actually when it's coming into place is key.
Yeah.
It's very clear from talking to you now, but always, that you have a real energy for this subject. What is it that excites you and motivates you most?
So it's about getting things right, fundamentally. But it's also about, it's amazing how many areas, audits, accounts preparation even, there'll be different taxation treatments. I'm not a tax specialist, but audits, ethical standards, anti-money laundering regulations even, how much judgment and subjectivity there is involved in coming to a decision which would be considered right. So it's really, for me, what's really interesting is interpreting things and giving a judgment and discussing that and defending that judgment. It's quite similar to legal matters, the legislation. Putting together a written argument, discussing that, and being free to change opinion. If something is, you may well come with a set opinion. If something's argued against, it's being accepting of a different opinion as well, and saying, yes, actually that is right. So it's just interesting to talk through things, think about things, and getting things right.
Thank you for sharing that. I think it really does come through, as with any profession, that when somebody is so intrigued and curious about a particular matter, it can get everyone else excited as well. So thank you ever so much for joining us today on Duncan Toplis On Air.
Thank you.